Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Lapsed Graps, a podcast where I, Sam, a person who watches pro wrestling, sit down with my friend
Jam, who doesn't anymore.
and we discuss the wacky week that was in professional wrestling. Now, just before we get into everything that has happened recently, we do want to take a moment and say rest in peace to Casey Michael, the owner and operator of Squared Circle Sirens, who passed away this week at 26 years old. Casey was the man when it comes to women's professional wrestling. A lot of people have come forward and talked about just what an incredible friend he was these last couple of days. And while I never had the opportunity to interact or work with him personally, you can see the impact he had on the industry just by going through his Twitter mentions right now. You've got people like Charlotte Flair, Mia Yim, Chelsea Green, all reaching out and saying how sorry they are to see that he has passed. He was the really only scoop guy for the PC with hirings and women's wrestling in general, and he was an avid supporter of the sport, and he will be missed. Do you have anything to add to that, Jim?
Yeah, just the same sentiment. This is just a big loss for the wrestling community. I didn't know him personally or at all, really, but I always monitored what he did in this business very closely, and I always recognized that as far as journalism goes, he was always one of the better journalists out there. Like the way he went about things, it just seemed really genuine, and he always I got the impression that everything he did was out of the betterment of not only wrestling but women's wrestling. Like he seemed passionate about what he did, and he tried his best to use his platform to elevate what he did. And I always really admire that. And that's you don't get a lot of voices out there in journalism or this industry, and it's just a big loss. And he will be missed. The voices like that are hard to come by, and hopefully more voices like his emerge out of this, out of just being inspired by what he did. But this is just a big loss, and I give my condolences to his family and friends out there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so jumping right into the topic of the podcast, every week we'll be going over the week that was in wrestling. Right now, the plan is to film on Wednesdays or Thursdays, so that'll usually mean that the week's AEW or NXT episode will follow on that following week's show. There's still some kinks to work out there. But because we do have now almost a year of wrestling to go back and cover, we're just going to start with the most recent stuff. And that would be that Pat McAfee had an incredible match with Adam Cole at TakeOver 30. Did you see any of this across your timeline, Jam?
I didn't see any footage, but I saw a lot of tweets saying that he was surprisingly good. So like I kind of just want to ask, like, was he like genuinely good at wrestling, or was it just like, oh, we all thought Pat McAfee was going to be really bad, and that's why he came off really good?
I think it's a little bit of both. The guy is a legitimately good promo, which you would hope he is, being that he has the Pat McAfee show with Fox Sports for the last couple of years. But it's not even necessarily just comfortable on the mic. He knew how to play the crowd. He knew what to say and what to do to make the people in the PC, even though they are employees, seemed like they legitimately wanted Adam Cole to jump down his throat. And he was the perfect foil to Adam Cole in this match and in their feud leading up to TakeOver 30, in that he was a big guy who seemed to just kind of walk in and expect that he was going to take the top spot. And it gave Adam Cole someone to play off of that could really keep up with him on the mic and in the ring. It's probably the closest we're going to get to an Adam Cole MJF like dream match where they're both comfortable and doing their thing, because I really honestly think that Pat's promo at least was to that level. Now, as far as the grappling goes, he had some spots that, needed cover, and this was a really good first match for him, primarily because Adam Cole was there to carry him through. But he had one moment in particular where from the mat he leapt up onto the third rope, like the top rope, and then avoided I believe it was going to be a Hurricane Rana, and backflipped off the top rope to land on his feet in the center of the ring, and that just drove the internet crazy, myself included. It was insane because you always think of the guy as a punter in the NFL and maybe not the most athletic dude in the world, and he proved everybody wrong right there. It was wild.
Cool.
Yeah, very cool indeed. All right, so I guess keeping going with NXT, Karrion Kross, who is a recent signing within the last year from Impact Wrestling, used to be known as Killer Kross, won his first NXT title at TakeOver 30 by defeating Keith Lee in a really really bad match. Like it was really bad, but there are reports that he was injured really early on and just kind of had to be carried to the finish. So, all the things considered in that respect, it wasn't the worst thing in the world. But then on the following Wednesday after NXT 30, he relinquished the title, which is, just the worst. You feel so bad for the guy. He's worked so hard to get where he is. He's put in the work. He's been one of the top heels on the brand, and in his first title defense, he's gonna have to give it up.
So I kind of have I have more of a problem with the fact that they gave the title to Keith Lee and he lost in like a month or something like that. Cause I saw the buzz when Keith Lee first won it. I feel like it was like a week or two after, or in the same time frame at least, of when I left wrestling media, and it was just such like a big, overwhelming, positive response. People were really excited to see where he's going, but to take all of that feedback and then just make him a transitional champion, I feel like WWE dropped the ball there. And especially when it turns out that Cross ended up having to give up right after that, which I feel for the guy there because from what I saw, Cross was doing really good stuff. Cross has a really great presence, I think, as not only a villain but just a wrestler in general. And I get why you would want to put the towel on him even so soon, but at the expense of Keith Lee, after every every positive response that came out of it, it's super disappointing. I feel like if I was deeper into wrestling as I was a few months ago, I'd be really mad about it.
Yeah, no, definitely putting Keith Lee in that transitional champion role on NXT is not great, and I think it would frustrate a lot more people a lot more than it does currently if he hadn't been immediately moved over to Raw. If he had been a transitional champion and then just kind of gone back to his mid card status, you'd see a lot more people very vocal about how frustrating it is. But with him being moved almost immediately over to Raw, and then uh having that god awful theme song that he's got now, which by the way they got rid of Bask in My Glory and it's now like a awkward like rock riff, and
Oh, I love that theme.
it's the worst. Yeah, there's some weird stuff going on right now with the WWE themes. The team that's been making them for the last like 6 years, CFOS or CFOS, I'm not really sure how you pronounce it, have been fired, and there's a new team coming in. But right now, it's a lot of really generic, just like here's the opening to the old theme and guitar riff, or not even really, or it's all that. It's like the opening to the CFOS theme and then a guitar riff, and it's bad. And hopefully, they're just placeholder themes until the new crew can get in and do some real work. But I don't see why you would really want to lose the Bask in My Glory unless you just no longer have the rights to it.
Well, two things on that. One, why did they get fired?
There's not really been any clear distinction on that. The rumor I've heard around is that WWE thought they were paying them too much for their return on investment, which I understand if they weren't making the most iconic themes in the last 30 years. But, that's just me.
Yeah, that's weird. But to pivot slightly. Like, how has Keith Lee's booking been on Raw? Because I understand what happened at Payback, him being Randy Orton really fast, but beyond that, like, how has his booking been on the actual show?
So, from what I've seen of Raw, I don't watch Raw a ton. It hasn't been so bad yet. He ended up in a triple threat match for a number one contendership, I believe, for the WWE title. Because Drew McIntyre, it's presumed, is injured, and even if he isn't,
Oh,
the next pay-per-view upcoming is Clash of Champions, which, as we all know, is the only day a year that all of the titles are defended in WWE, unless you're in NXT, which, now that they're all kind of considered three equal brands, you would think NXT would come up to Clash of Champions as well, but I digress. It's been okay. I know he ended up making it into that final triple threat. I'm not 100% sure if he proceeded forward to be the number one contender, or if he didn't, if he ate that pin. I can definitely find that out and check back in here in just a moment.
okay, but now I've got questions about Drew McIntyre because I didn't hear about an injury at all. That sucks. So, like, did he drop the title, or is it just like,
No, so as of right now, he still holds the title, and the injury is being very kayfabed. Initially, we were told that he had been attacked by Randy Orton and like cracked his skull and was in the hospital, and it was not looking great. Now it's looking like it might just be like a hairline fracture of the jaw. So as of right now, he is still the title holder, and he is still expected to defend his title at Clash of Champions.
okay, hopefully he's all healed up by then because that would be a bummer for that reign to end. Because from what I saw of it, he was having a really good reign. I'm still disappointed that he never really had a chance to have the win in front of like actual fans or like defend the title in front of actual fans, considering just how over he was with the fans before the pandemic. But and like for it to end like this, if it ends with a injury, him giving up the title, that would be such bad luck for him. Fingers crossed for him that he's all good.
Yeah, it would be just the worst luck for that guy to be, considered the chosen one, sent away, brought in, finally win the title, and then lose it to a dumb injury on a botch spot. I've got that update from Raw for you. He beat Dolph Ziggler to earn his way into the triple threat match with Seth Rollins and Randy Orton, and then Seth, it looks like, ate the pin for Randy to proceed on to challenge Drew McIntyre at Clash of Champions. So he didn't eat the pin, so he's still strong there, but he did not proceed on to the pay per view.
Okay,
So, not great, but not
right,
nearly as bad as it could be.
right. Could be worse.
You know, absolutely. So, continuing on ahead, over on Raw again, Roman Reigns. Well, actually, this is SmackDown. I apologize. Roman Reigns is now a Paul Heyman guy. So with Brock Lesnar's contract, all but done and, not looking like it's going to be re-signed. He's probably done with the company, at least for now. Again, Paul Heyman needed something new to do. And Roman Reigns, who recently re-debuted at the end of SummerSlam, uh, is, back full-time wrestling and is a Paul Heyman guy now. What do you think about that?
Well, I actually have a question about the Brock thing, but first I'll try to stay on the Roman thing. Without knowing the full context of why they're together, unless they just haven't given it yet, I did see the clip of the big reveal, and I thought the big reveal was really well done. Camera wise, suspense wise, that was just really well done. And I think this is a good turning point for Roman Reigns as a character because I feel like he's had I guess you could say, an identity crisis. Because like personality wise, I think he's always had a great personality that's really shined very well on camera in the last few years. But he's always had that lasting image of the Shield. Like when the Shield broke up, Dean Ambrose completely changed his look and personality. Seth Rollins completely changed his look and personality, theme music, all that. Roman Reigns still had the Shield vest, the Shield music, and there was kind of like a dissonance. Everybody wanted to see change out of Roman Reigns, and I think this is like the first step to giving us something new with that character, look wise at least. And I think that if they play the cards right, this could be really interesting. I'm not sure if Roman Reigns is supposed to be like a full blown heel or if he's just has a heel manager. But I think this could be, however it goes, I think it could tell some interesting stories.
Yeah, no, definitely. And especially considering the end to Backlash, he is absolutely 100% a heel on this run. He came down the ramp at Backlash, signed the contract to indicate that he was going to participate in the match that was already in progress, and then won the match to win the Universal title, which makes no sense to me personally, but people loved it. So, whatever.
Okay, hearing that for the first time, I'm mixed on two things. One,
Yeah.
that I mean, it's wrestling, so I guess I can't like critique realism too much, but it's like that.
Oh, I was. I was absolutely critiquing realism on the night of Backlash. It was, it was bad, man. It was not good.
I'm just trying to figure out like how can you sign on for a match that's already in park? That's like if I signed, if the NBA finals are happening right now and I sign a 10-day contract to play in game five, they're not going to let me in the game.
100%. 100%. That is exactly how that goes, and it is ridiculous. But yeah, it was a triple threat match between the Fiend, uh, oh, Braun Strowman, that's who it was, and Roman Reigns. So the Fiend and Braun Strowman, they come down, they're just staring at each other, and the referee calls for the bell, which made absolutely no sense because Roman wasn't even out. They're just beating the holy hell out of each other, and then they do the typical collapsing ring spot with the Fiend and Braun Strowman. The Fiend is laid out in the middle of the ring. Braun Strowman's nowhere to be found. Roman Reigns comes down, spears him in the middle of the broken ring. 1, 2, 3, your new Universal Champion. It was such a bad way to end that show.
So like realism wise, I think that's weird, but like from a character standpoint, if you're trying to get Roman Reigns as a heel and he's literally just picking up the scraps, I kind of think that works. Cause
You
like
know,
Because like if you hate the finish, then you're at least projecting that hate towards women, which like it's hard to project hate these days. Like if you don't like the finish, and you blame WWE more than you blame the character. But like if you want a reason to just not only establish Roman as a bad guy, but just have an actual reason to hate Roman, then I think that kind of works.
yeah, no, absolutely. It's one that as you're reacting with how much you hate it and how stupid it is online or to your friend or in my case to my fiance who's trying to do anything but pay attention to me, you realize as you're voicing that opinion that you're like, oh, this is exactly what they wanted.
Hmm.
They wanted me to react every time I see him of, oh, well, he's not the real Universal Champion. He wasn't even in the match.
Hmm.
That's what they want. They want that heat that's going to sit there and that's going to last. And they absolutely succeeded because the only thing I'm going to think of when I see Roman Reigns, at least for the next 2, 3 months of his reign, is that he's a paper champion and he's not actually the Universal Champion.
And
I
I think
want
that works. Oh, go on.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I want WWE to release that shirt that came out around the time that Trump got elected that said like "Not my president" with a picture of like Hillary Clinton, but I want it to be "Not my Universal Champion," which is the Fiend's face. I would buy that in a heartbeat. I would love it. Hit me up. You don't even have to pay me for the licensing rights. Just take it and just make it and give it to me. I want it. I want it now.
I was gonna say that's a great idea. You might need to call up the managing team for like a one-off gig or something.
Absolutely. WWE merchandising. Hit me up.
Hmm. And like I think this is also interesting because like for years WWE did a lot of things booking wise with Roman to elicit a reaction, especially a negative reaction to get people talking. Like when he beat Undertaker and had that 15-minute promo, which really wasn't even a promo. He was just stood in the ring for 15 minutes and just said, "This is my yard now." That was to elicit a negative reaction, and but for whatever reason, they never. pull the trigger of him being a full blown heel. They just kept giving him heel heat and wanted us to like him, which was weird. But like if they keep doing that stuff and actually are dead set on saying we're going to make Roman Reigns a heel, then he could be a really great villain in the coming year at least. Sooner than that,
Absolutely. This could be the Cena heel turn we never got, but we all wanted. Where it
yes.
is just the guy who is perennially the babyface, the greatest of all time, the one that makes the little kids interested is now saying, fuck them kids and just having fun with it. And I am really, really excited to see him have fun as a wrestler again. It feels like it's been a long time since we've gotten to see Roman Reigns have fun.
Yes, but to backtrack a little bit, like to get us into this topic, you mentioned that it doesn't seem like it looks like Brock Lesnar is gone from WWE. Can you? Because I'm not super familiar with what's going on there. Like, has he
Yeah,
not signed or?
so the last thing that I've heard, and there may be new information out there that I'm just not aware of, he had not signed his latest contract extension, and his contract was up at the end of August. So as of right now, he is not currently signed. And there was actually a AEW media call earlier today. Today that we're recording is September the 3rd, and someone asked Tony Khan flat out, "Are you signing Brock Lesnar? Are you bringing him to AEW?" Which I think would be perfect. I
Mm,
think putting Brock Lesnar as, even if you like convince him to take a buttload of money just to wear a mask and be like number 35 in the Dark Order and just this brute of a man who will brutalize anyone, would be a perfect role for him because he wouldn't have to talk either.
mhm.
But according to Tony Khan, there's no confirmation or denial on signing Brock Lesnar. He has reached out. He hasn't necessarily heard anything back. So maybe he'll go to AEW. Maybe he's using the fact that he's talking to Tony Khan as a way of getting Vince to separate himself from even more of his money. It's really unclear, but I think it would be really interesting to see Brock come back on Raw and have Paul doing a kind of modern stable on WWE programming with the two dominant guys for each brand.
Yeah, either stable or like what he was doing with CM Punk a few years ago when it was just I'm doing this stuff for Punk and now I'm doing this separate stuff for Brock. It's very like an old school manager role where like Bobby Heenan has his guys, like they weren't
Mm-hmm.
all necessarily together working together, but he was doing his thing with Andre Giant, then he was doing his other thing with his tag team, doing his other thing with this thing. And I think that would be cool. And if I would be very shocked if Brock didn't end up signing back with WWE or end up wrestling elsewhere. But like playing with that idea for a second, like I think Brock and AEW would be really fun whether he talked or not. Cause like I feel like a WWE made guy like Brock would be the top heel immediately in a place like AEW that really thrives on like that indie wrestling style environment, homemade guys and whatnot. And you
Yep.
can take a guy like him and like you serve him everything on a silver platter and you have him talk about his entitlements and whatnot. People would hate that and we would hate him and it would make for just a really great villain that you just love to hate. I think that would be really fun. I don't see it happening, but if it happens, that would be super fun.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like that's kind of what they tried to do with Sean Spears when he first came over, being like the guy who is like just the best professional wrestler and is just super talented, and it just kind of fizzled. So I don't know if they'd be, I guess maybe they'd be able to pull it off with Brock because he is a
Mm.
legitimate world champion over in WWE, whereas Sean Spears was a mid card guy coming in to be the top heel and then pretty quickly relegated to mid card status, who we haven't seen on TV in almost 6 months. I don't think he's been on TV since the start of the pandemic, uh, which, could be a whole personal choice and none of my business. But I don't know. My only worry with AEW bringing in all of these WWE guys, because now you've got Brody Lee, you've got Zack Ryder, you have Sean Spears, you know, uh, is that it's going to start feeling like the WCW stuff where they were just bringing over anybody who had signed a WWE contract to say that they had a WWE guy. Like at the start, they had really big WWE guys like Macho Man and Hulk Hogan and guys like that. But then just near the end, it was like, oh, were you on 3 episodes in like 92? Come do a 6 month stint with us and we'll make you a star. And I don't want to see them fall into those old traps of just grabbing whoever walks away from the company so that they can say that we've got them and you don't.
Well, I view it a little bit differently. Like, I don't mind signing ex WWE guys just because they gotta go somewhere, you know. Like, you can even make the argument that they'll sign a whole bunch of New Japan guys, and if they kept signing New Japan guys, and people would say, "Oh, this is becoming New Japan," I think.
Yeah, but I don't
But
think anyone would mind a New Japan America. I feel like they would mind a 17th hour of WWE television, basically just on a different network.
that is a good point. That's a good point too, though. I still just wouldn't mind it as long as it doesn't look like they're signing these guys and then just immediately giving everything on the table. Like with a Brock situation, like that would work is like character wise if you're just making him this self entitled character, give him the title immediately, serve all these matches and opponents to him on a silver platter. But like if you do that with everybody, like if Brody Lee's first match back he won the world title, which even then there's still like a Tyrion thing because that was like his first pay per view match, wasn't it?
For the world title, I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, so like if you're signing all these ex WWE guys and then you're immediately throwing them into the main event, then it just looks away. Like with WCW, it looked away because they had all these homegrown guys, but they'd rather sign the Savages, the Hogans, and then
Hmm.
just put them at the forefront while all these homegrown guys who were working their way up the ladder had to take a back seat.
And then went to WWE and became, The Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin and
Exactly.
Mankind and guys
Mm.
like that. So, maybe bringing all these WWE guys over will give, Private Party something to do. Who knows? You know.
Yeah, as long as they're not taking like any spots, if they're not taking private party spot, then I'm good.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. So continuing with the SmackDown thing, did you see the Big E segment on Talking Smack? Did that come across the timeline at all?
It did. There was a big discourse on it. No pun intended,
Yeah.
because it's Big E, but
Yeah.
there was a whole discourse about that.
Well, just to
Uh,
start, let's get your just opinion on that. I'm assuming because you've seen it and you're still
mhm,
friends with a lot of people in the industry, you've
mhm,
seen the full clip, so you know the full context for what was said and how it was said. So,
right.
how did gut reaction? How do you feel about what was said by the Miz and how Biggie handled it?
I think Big E handled it really well, like assuming that this is all just off the cuff, which Talking Smack was always off the cuff. And
Yeah,
and also I have to well, first off, when did Talking Smack come back? Because like I didn't know
Talking
it came back, and
Smack
then just
came back literally the week that Renee Young quit. So it seems like they told Renee Young, "Hey, we will bring it back if you stay." And she
hmm
said, "How about you bring it back and I'll think about it." They brought it back and then she left. I don't think she ever hosted an episode of the new Talking Smack. It's all been Charlie Caruso from the restart, I think. And there's only been like 3 episodes, but I mean, it's more Talking Smack. It's Charlie Caruso and the Miz right now because Daniel Bryan is away because his wife just had another baby, and so he's up there, doing the whole pandemic and new father thing with her. So he's not around for that. But it's the Miz has been holding it down until, he tried to open his mouth about Kofi and whether or not he deserved a title shot.
yeah, like that's the way Miz went about that was really odd to me because like I get what he was getting at in saying that like people hated him when he came in and there's he still worked his way up from there, but like
But he was a heel.
there's
He was supposed to be hated. Like if he wasn't
well
hated,
yeah
he would have been fired.
right yeah that's another
I
thing,
don't
but
think that's
like
a real equivalency. Like I don't think that's a real argument.
that's what I was gonna say. Like there's it's an apples to oranges thing because whereas he kept working hard and got a whole bunch of tower shots, got world championship, WWE Championship, beat Cena in the main event of WrestleMania, and like I feel like he was only in WWE like 5, 6 years at that point. You look at Kofi, who worked his way from the ground up, didn't even get a single title shot until he was in the company for about 10 years. And then as soon as he loses it, he's completely out of the main event picture. Whereas Miz, he kept getting opportunity after opportunity after opportunity. You could say, I don't know if you want to talk about like race for a second, because I feel like there's just a racial component to it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, I think it would be irresponsible for the two of us to sit here and talk about this situation and not bring up the fact that, like, Miz is a white guy who's signed by a Connecticut company that has typically not been super kind to men of color in their company. I mean, Kofi was the second world champion in almost 100 years of the WWF, let alone the WWF and the WWE. I think it'd be irresponsible not to at least bring up the fact that there's probably some sort of racial, well, not even some sort of, like, there's absolutely a racial component going with this.
Yeah, absolutely. And not even to say that like someone in WWE not calling anybody racist or anything like that, but just they look at this chiseled white guy as something that's more marketable. So it was easier to push
Oh,
him to
I'll
the fore.
absolutely call somebody racist on this. Like, you got someone who looks like Big E, someone
Mhm.
on the mic like Xavier Woods, and someone with just the raw like talent and skill of Kofi Kingston, and you're telling me all they're good for is comedy spots? No.
And when you
No,
put it,
there's no way.
yeah, when
There's
you put
no
it that
way.
way, there's definitely like not just a racial component, but a racist component to it. Even not even necessarily a covert race. I mean, overt racism, but it's covert racism. They rather
Mhm.
they realize it or not, and it kind of this is very timely. We're talking about this because I don't know how into basketball you are, but
The Kenosha thing, yeah.
yeah, like Steve Nash got signed to coach the Brooklyn Knicks,
The
Brooklyn
Brooklyn
Nets.
Nets, yeah.
Yeah, Brooklyn Nets for 4 years, and he's got zero coaching experience. Which, like, sure, he was a great player. He's a Hall of Famer, but you're giving him like two of the biggest NBA players in the game, and there were a lot of actually black coaches, experienced coaches who just got fired recently. Nate McMillan got fired from the Pacers recently. Alvin Gentry got fired from the Pelicans. They easily could have taken that role because they have the experience, but the Nets wanted to go with someone with no experience at all. And that's not to say that Nash won't do a good job. It's he wouldn't be the first coach who had no experience and did a great job with the team, but to see him skip the line there, that's exactly what I'm talking about with The Miz, and that there's a racial component that in WWE's eyes justifies pushing him over and over again, whereas Kofi Kingston, the black
Mhm.
man, had to wait 10 years just to get one opportunity.
Exactly. And it may not even be that anyone in the booking office is overtly saying, he's black, he's not getting a title shot, but there
Hmm.
is definitely a belief in the company that a black man holding the world title for longer than a week or two is not going to be something that wrestling fans as a whole respond positively to, which, if nothing else, shows that they're willing to kowtow to racists. I mean, going back to the beginning of the show with the Keith Lee thing, I mean, he is easily the most dominant uh, performer in NXT in the last 3 years. Tommaso Ciampa and Gargano. Goodness gracious, I can't speak. Tommaso Ciampa and Johnny Gargano are very, very talented, but they were beating the hell out of each other, and other people would come in and beat them all the time. But then Keith Lee would just destroy people and run through that division, got his title shot, decided out of the goodness of his heart to relinquish his North American title, which came from nowhere, and then dropped his title to the shiny new white boy in like 3 minutes. It doesn't make sense.
Absolutely. And like it's very again, there's a racial component to it. And like for the Miz to basically say that as long as you work hard or you'll get the opportunities like I did, that's ignoring all of the racial components at risk. And I think Biggie explained himself really well, and even without necessarily like calling out race outright, because I don't think he brought up race, did he?
He
Unless I'm just
didn't. He
forgetting
called
it.
out
Yeah.
he called out Mrs. Privilege. He called out the
Exactly. That's
fact
a
that
perfect
Miz
word
came
for it.
into the company an established reality TV star. For the people who don't know, Miz got his start on the Real World
Hmm.
doing Macho Man, Randy Savage, and Hulk Hogan impressions in the confessional, and then that's what got him signed. Like straight up doing those impressions on TV got him signed for a developmental contract. So he came in with star power and with recognized skill on the mic, and people knew that they were going to do something with him. Now he is absolutely correct that he has carved himself a niche in the company and kept his job for nearly 15 years, and that is on his own back, absolutely. But it's irresponsible of him to say that him and Big E or him and Kofi, who traveled the Indies for nearly a decade before getting a tryout, let alone signed, started at the same place.
Absolutely. And again, like that's the perfect phrase for it. It's a white privilege component, and it's not a knock against the Miz specifically because he did, in fact, work hard for what he did. Even Steve Nash, to some extent, looking at his years in the NBA, like he worked hard to be a Hall of Famer, but because of white privilege, he gets uh, the most lucrative coaching job in the NBA right now because of white privilege. Miz has a 15-year plus job with the company doing media, movies, all got all these title reigns, and Kofi only has. It took him 10 years to get one under his belt, and he hasn't even so much as gotten a second shot at the title since losing it. So
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, no, it's ridiculous, and hopefully there'll be a change in culture there, or at least a change in belief sooner rather than later. Because seeing all of these incredibly talented guys come through and just know that they're going to hit their ceiling faster than anyone else is just it's heartbreaking, honestly.
hmm.
So continuing on, back over to NXT for the episode that aired on Tuesday this week because of, I believe, the NHL playoffs. We've got Mercedes Martinez and Rhea Ripley, who have been kind of circling each other for the last several weeks. Mercedes Martinez, of course, is the tag partner of I just forgot her name. I wanted to call her Tegan Knox, and that's not Tegan Knox. It's the person feuding with Tegan Knox. Oh goodness.
Dakota Kai.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm the one who's supposed to be watching wrestling. Goodness gracious. Yes, the tag partner of Dakota Kai and Rhea Ripley have been kind of like facing off and squaring each other up for a while. And it was announced during NXT this week that on next Tuesday, they will face off in only the second steel cage match in the company's history for women. So Io Shirai and Dakota Kai were, of course, famously in that first match where Mercedes Martinez aligned herself with Dakota Kai by slamming Io's face into the steel cage door and eventually causing Io to win because she passed out and slumped out of the cage before Dakota could exit. This is going to be a slobber knocker. This is going to be insane, and I am so excited.
So I didn't know that this was happening, but like on paper, just knowing what these two individuals can do, like that, I feel like that sounds like the components of like maybe this is bigging it up too high, but I feel like that could be a match of the year candidate if they play their cards right.
100%. The only thing that makes me sad is that this isn't going to happen in front of fans because
Yeah.
Rhea Ripley destroying Mercedes Martinez and either escaping the cage or pinning her in the middle of that cage would have the same kind of crowd reaction that happened when she won the NXT Women's title and people rushed the ring. It would be insane. But yeah, no, this has every opportunity to be just a ridiculously good match in terms of work rate and just brutality. The only thing that would make it better is if it was similar to the third fall in the Finn Balor and Adam Cole match from TakeOver Brooklyn last year, where the cage comes down and it's just covered in barbed wire and weapons and just let them
Oh yeah.
beat the holy crap out of each other. That
Mhm.
would be incredible, but they're women and, WWE thinks they're soft and it's not going to happen.
Yeah, which is a shame.
It is, because holy crap, am I excited to watch these two just beat the ever loving hell out of each other. But speaking again of NXT, we had a 60-minute, not 60 man, 60-minute Iron Man match between Adam Cole, Finn Balor, uh, Johnny Gargano, and Tommaso Ciampa to determine who the new holder of the NXT title would be, and it ended in a tie. It ended in a tie. 60 minutes. They took up 4 segments of the show, the last hour of the show, and it ended in a tie.
Like a
So
four-way
Adam,
tie?
no, like a two-way tie. Like Adam
Okay.
Cole and Finn Balor will be facing off this week, this Tuesday, in a 30-minute uh, sudden death first fall wins, which is just a match to determine who the champion is. A lot of people were pissed about this online. A lot of people were really happy that it wasn't because of a run-in or the Undisputed Era making themselves known, but it was stupid. It was so stupid.
I feel I can see why people are mad because it's like it's one thing to do this in the main event of your show. It's a whole another thing to do it in a 60-minute main event of the show because you invest so much time into something like that, expecting a winner. And if you do all that just to say we're gonna have a regular rematch the following week, like if there were fans in attendance, I wouldn't be surprised if people asked for refunds or felt cheated just because like it's like a mad. Wait, shouldn't it have gone to like sudden death overtime? I was gonna say like if
You
Brett
would
versus
think,
Shawn went like to like if they did something like that where they said, "Oh, WrestleMania's gonna end in a tie. You gotta watch the next episode of Raw to figure out what happened." But like they went into like sudden death. Shouldn't there be like a sudden death in this four-way thing?
yeah, you would think that with it being a recorded, like not live, recorded show, they would have been able to trim segments so that there was enough time at the end to be like, okay, you two tied, sudden death, go, and then just have that emotional release of the finally the winner being like, I've survived 60 minutes plus, and I am finally the champion. But no, they were just like, oh yeah, TV time's up, 60 minutes is up. Oh, you're tied. Well, we'll see you next week. There's no way this would have worked if there were fans in attendance. People would have booed, screamed, chanted restart the match. It would have
Mhm.
been Hell in a Cell all over again.
Yeah, this would have been really bad for our fans. Like
Yeah.
I feel like see when I see stuff like this, like I always felt like this was just something that the writers did to fill time. Like I
Hmm.
remember like on an episode of, like Bruce Pritchard's podcast, I forget exactly what he was talking about, but he said that like whenever they did a gauntlet match, it was just to like free up time, like give us like an hour, hour and a half so we don't have to think of segments, just have these guys do what they do best in the ring for 90 minutes and just wrestle. So let's have a gauntlet match. I feel like they did the 60-minute Iron Man match just to fill time and either we'll figure out what to do next week or we'll just fill time for this week and next week. But like it seemed see I didn't even see it and I feel cheated just thinking
Yeah.
about it. Like it's
100%, man. I sat there for 2 hours on Tuesday night and oh, I was so angry. It was so ridiculous. But yeah, no. Now moving over to the normal time slot for NXT and a actually very good show, the go home episode of AEW before their kind of penultimate show, their WrestleMania, if you will, All Out aired on Wednesday, and we had two incredible matches. We had Thunder Rosa versus Serena Deeb. Thunder Rosa, of course, is the current NWA Women's World Champion. And she showed up to challenge Hikaru Shida, the current AEW Women's Champion, in her open challenge 2 weeks ago, letting her know that she was going to be next to challenge and that she would see her at All Out. So this was a tune-up match. A lot of people expected this to be a squash, and it wasn't. Serena put in a hell of an effort, and a lot of people online are saying that she should be the first challenger for Thunder Rosa's title when NWA returns later at, I believe, October is when they've announced they're going to be coming back. So, what do you think about that?
a few things. First, so did they sign Serena Deeb? Because I remember she got
Uh,
fired when they did the Black Tuesday thing, but
I don't know that she's been signed. I think maybe it was just a pay per appearance kind of a situation, sort of in the same way that like Fuego del Sol and guys like that are showing up on Dark. This one just happened to be on Dynamite. I haven't
okay.
seen anything about her being signed or re-signed at this point, though.
And how deep is this like AEW NWA relationship? Is it like a relationship, or did they just bring over their women's champion to say like we're not active right now, so you could spend some time doing AEW for now.
So it's definitely deeper than that because Absolute Ricky Starks, the former NWA TV champion who lost it to Ziggy Dice right before the pandemic happened and they were not able to continue filming, showed up on Dynamite like 6 or 7 weeks ago and was announced as being signed by Dynamite and is currently working with Taz and Brian Cage on that program. So, and from everything I've seen, Billy Corgan gave him his blessing to go and like work with them and get signed, and then that kind of opened up the doors for like a relationship between the companies. I said Taz and you lit up. What's up?
Yeah, cause like so like is Taz like managing Ricky Starks now?
Yeah, Taz is managing Ricky Starks and Brian Cage from Impact Wrestling, who is now signed full time with All Elite. And not only is Taz managing Ricky Starks and Brian Cage is the new holder of the FTW title.
I heard about the FTW title thing when they brought that back,
Hmm.
but like I didn't hear about Ricky. That's actually that could be a really good combo. The more I think about it,
Yeah.
because Starks is such like a naturally charming character, and
Hmm.
Taz, the way he goes about promos just makes you wanna believe in a guy. The more he just hypes someone up, like
Yeah.
I think he's just as good as Paul Heyman as far as just elevating other wrestlers.
Yeah. And just to get into the people they brought in to be managers, as well as Taz, you also have Eddie Kingston now on the
I
program
heard about that. Yeah,
wrestling. He's wrestled one match. He's only wrestled one match. He's been managing lately the Butcher and the Blade and the Lucha Brothers, so they have their own little stable going. The prevailing theory right now is that when Pac is able to come back over from the UK and re-establish Murder Triangle, it'll end up being a Pac Murder Triangle versus Eddie Kingston and Butcher and the Blade kind of trios clash, and that might be the way they introduce a trios championship on their third hour of TV starting next year.
okay, that could be interesting. Like, I'm
Yeah.
just glad Eddie Kingston is just doing stuff on AEW because, like, I was so happy when I found out they signed him because, like, for all the hard work he's done, he deserves it.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
And that's another one of those things that gives everyone kind of pause where it's like did the NWA just release everybody or are they giving them license to go over there and do their thing? Because if they are and Eddie Kingston is actively managing these guys, that would mean that there's a possibility that the Lucha Brothers and Butcher and the Blade show up on NWA TV to back up Kingston when that gets rolling again. So we lose out on Beer City Bruisers, but we gain those relationships there, which would be very cool.
Oh yeah, very cool. Like if they could just swap talent back and forth and like it goes to and I always admired AEW for this. One of the things I thought they got right is just making wrestling feel like a whole expansive universe. Because with WWE, more often than not, there's just you watch WWE and they establish their own history. It's very rare when they talk about things outside of WWE. But AEW fully embraces stuff outside of AEW, like they have different champions from different organizations come in. You have Kenny Omega defending that AEW, AAA Mega Championship now
Mhm.
with Thunder Rosa with her NWA Championship and all these different people from NWA. And like you've got, or even believe CMLL. Some people came in from AEW. I could just be getting my letters mixed up,
It's
but
more AAA that has a direct relationship with uh, AEW. CMLL is the company they work with is MLW more than anything.
I feel like this. Oh, is I know what I'm thinking of. I think it's called Oriental Wrestling. Is
Oh
that?
yeah, OWE. Yeah,
Yeah,
Oriental
that.
Wrestling Entertainment.
Yeah,
SEMA and those guys. Yeah, yeah, yeah. They
yeah.
haven't appeared in about a year, so there's not a ton. I believe they're actually working with MLW now as well. But yeah, for a time, OWE was working with AEW in the United States.
But yeah, what I'm trying to get at is just that I like that they fully embrace things outside of its own history, however brief it may be. They just embrace other organizations, other histories. They fully talk about how guys came from WWE, New Japan, and they actually say the names of these organizations. They don't try to beat around the bush, and I always really like that. But not to go ahead.
Oh no, continue. Go right ahead. I have to look something up right now anyway.
Oh, I was just gonna like try to trail back to Thunder Rosa because I didn't want to like bury the lead there. I know we kind of went on a tangent about AEW, NWA.
Yeah, no. So Thunder Rosa, ahead of her match on Saturday night, just looks dominant, looks mean as hell, and I am really, really excited to see her kind of push Hikaru to her limit. Because that's the one thing I've had an issue with Hikaru so far is that she has seemed almost kind of bored in her defenses. Like she's put in effort and she's absolutely worked hard, but there's a level of like, oh, I know I'm better than you, and you know I'm better than you. So why am I trying? Like, why are you here? Don't waste my time. Which is great in a heel, but she's supposed to be a babyface. So I'm hopefully we see her uh kind of at least get pushed to a limit, you know?
Yeah, I feel like to me not seeing like what actually been doing, I feel like that like on paper, even as a face, I think that
Mhm.
I feel like even in a baby face, that could be if you the way you work it, it could be really well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And back to the AEW working well with others
Hmm.
conversation.
Hmm.
Tetsuya Endo, the current open weight champion in DDT Pro over in Japan, which is where Kenny Omega got his start. They just ended their version of the G1 Climax last week, maybe the week before, and he won the entire tournament. And because he's the title holder, that means he gets to call out whoever he wants. He chose to call out Kenny Omega and tell him to return home and challenge him for his title. So we could be saying once travel is opened back up, Kenny Omega returning home to DDT to challenge for the DDT open weight title.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about when you have these relationships where you just trade talent and
Mm-hmm.
it's like a case of like everybody wins, you know, like you get more exposure on lesser known companies,
Yep.
fans love to see it. It's super cool stuff. But again, going back to Thunder Rosa for a second, just knowing what she can do in the ring, that match with Hikaru Shida could be really, really fantastic. And I love the idea of this working relationship. I love the
Mm-hmm.
idea of just her in AEW because like she was always one of the highlights in the WA to me as far as not just wrestling but just promos because she's I feel like she's a really underrated promo. Like she feels real when I hear her talk. A lot of times like
Mm-hmm.
it just works on that level. And I'm curious, is this supposed to be like a double title match or is just like Hikaru
No,
Shida's
it's
title on the line?
just yeah, it's just for the AEW title. The
Okay.
NWA title is not currently on the line now. That doesn't mean to say that Hikaru couldn't show up in 3 months on NWA and say you had a challenge for mine, I want a challenge for yours, and that's entirely possible. And then with Thunder Rosa, excuse me, Thunder Rosa's company, Mission Pro Wrestling, and the kind of united association of like Championship Wrestling from Arizona and Championship Wrestling from Hollywood and the NWA, all starting to run monthly pay-per-views until they're able to go back in and do TV on Fight TV. That's another avenue they could take of having Hikaru show up on one of those, challenge for that title, and then that opens up that relationship even more.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of storytelling potential there, like from this relationship and from just that few alone. And
Mhm.
it sounds like it could make for some really great stuff.
Yeah. Now, speaking of storytelling, uh, the only other women's match on that card that I'm aware of, aside from the buy-in battle royal, which is on All Out every year, is Britt Baker versus Big Swole. Britt Baker, who's coming back from a fractured leg, she's been out almost 7 months, but able to keep this story going all the time. People were really excited for this. It had like main event implications because these two are really talented women who just cannot stand each other and have had like near misses on TV for the past month and a half, and it's on the pre-show. It's a pre-show match. The argument that I've heard from Tony Khan is that it's a cinematic match, so it's a pre-show match, which is fine and dandy and good, except for the fact that we all just watched WrestleMania in April, where they had two cinematic matches, one of which was a main event for one of the closing nights. So do you think that there's credence to it being a cinematic match and having to be on the pre-show so they can do everything live? Or what's your opinion on this one?
I I think the fact that they're trying to say it's gonna be a cinematic match is even worse because we wasn't it the last AEW pay-per-view or like 2 or 3 pay-per-views ago where they main evented with a cinematic match? It was what the
It wasn't.
Stampede match?
Yeah, it wasn't cinematic. It was the Stadium Stampede. But yes, it was. Well, actually, I guess there were cinematic aspects, like in the bar. But yeah, that was the very last AEW pay per view where the Stadium Stampede closed the show.
Yeah, so like when I hear that and they're claiming they're putting on the pre-show because it's cinematic, I just think that's a cop out because for whatever reason, like even when I was like super into wrestling, like I know it's this hesitance from AEW to really push that women's division. Like you'd barely see the women's champion on TV. Me referring to Nyla Rose when she was champion, like she didn't get as much TV time, I think, and like women in general didn't get as much TV time for whatever reason. For whatever reason, they seem to be reluctant to give anything more than just a short women's match on TV and their pay-per-views, and I don't really understand that because people want to get behind the women's division they have. Because on paper, when you look at the roster, they have one of the arguably the best women's roster in wrestling, but they don't use them nearly as much as they should. And even goes back to the women's tag team tournament I was hearing about how they put this big hoopla about it, but all the matches on YouTube and not on TV. And I don't get it. Like you have the talent. Why not showcase it on a big stage? I don't get
Yeah,
it. Like I said, it's a
exactly.
cop out.
And then the argument that a lot of people make is that, well, the women's roster is great and they're not very like used to working in ring. The person on the women's roster with the least amount of experience is Chris Statlander, and she has 3 years. There are people all over the place with way less talent than that and way less time in the ring than that who are getting more opportunities than all the women. I mean, you've got Leva Bates, who's been in the industry for 14 years. Nyla Rose, a former champion, has been in the industry for a decade. Like, none of these women are green, and the ones that are can be carried by the ones that aren't. It's one
Mm-hmm.
of those things where the further away from it we get, the more you realize that Kylie Ray probably had the right idea by asking for her release as soon as she did and just getting out ahead of it before she could be wasted, because now she's over in Impact and she's one of the 500 best wrestlers of the year,
Mm-hmm.
one of the
Uh,
100 best wrestlers of the year at this point.
I, the TV time thing, that I feel like that's another cop out too, because like you said, that there are plenty of women with experience, not just in ring experience, but TV experience. Leva Bates, you mentioned her. She was in NXT for a long time. You got different women who worked under the WWE banner and know how to work the TV angles, work the camera angles. And a lot of indie promotions that these women were in were on TV or online, but still with cameras. So they know how to work the cameras, and those who don't know how to work the cameras, you can put them in the ring with those who know how to work the camera. And if you don't put them in the ring, period, then nobody's going to learn anything. It's very much like a sink or swim type of thing. Like what they did with
Absolutely.
yeah, like what they do with NXT rookies. Like you're not gonna learn unless you just go in the ring on TV and on live events a whole bunch of times, and eventually you're gonna pick up the pace. But if you never showcase that talent, nobody's gonna pick up anything, and everybody's just sinking.
Yeah, 100%. And not even necessarily just NXT rookies, but to go back almost an hour at this point, Pat McAfee had his first match in a takeover and excelled and was incredible
Hmm.
because he had a guy in Adam Cole who's got almost as many years in the business as I am old. Like, there are opportunities here to do incredible things if you give people the chance and the leeway to do it themselves. It shows a lack of trust that is disappointing, frankly, from AEW and their women's division, a company that has said from the start that they're going to do things different and better than those guys up in Stanford, and it's looking like they're kind of falling short on that promise.
I completely agree.
Yeah. That seems like as good a place as anywhere to kind of end that. I do just real quick want to preview the AEW Heavyweight Championship match that'll be taking place on All Out. That is MJF and John Moxley. MJF's lawyer ended up in a match this week to confirm that he was going to be able to face John Moxley for the title.
Now,
Ended up with. Mhm.
just to pause that for a second, what exactly, like, so is, because I saw a commercial of that during the NBA playoffs the
Mhm.
the other day. So is the lawyer like a manager for MJF?
No,
Is
the
oh,
lawyer is new. The lawyer is Smart Mark Sterling, who is the producer of the Major Wrestling Figure podcast with Zack Ryder and Kurt Hawkins, Matt Cardona, and Brian Myers, former WWE guys. Matt Cardona, currently in AEW. Basically, how it went was they've been running this campaign to ban the paradigm shift in their title match, John Moxley's finisher, because it's too devastating, it's too dangerous. He's so young, he's got so much life ahead of him. MJF does. He wants to be able to hold his children and his grandchildren. He doesn't want to fall victim to the move. Totally wonderful heel move. Great, love it. Uh, John Moxley added a 17th page to the 16-page contract saying that it's banned, saying that if he doesn't get a match with MJF's lawyer the episode before All Out, then there's no match. So MJF's lawyer comes down, just gets absolutely throttled and destroyed, and then Wardlow enters the ring, beats down John Moxley just enough for MJF to start hobbling down to the ring with his walker, do the whole heel thing where he throws the walker, throws off the neck brace. He's fine. He's been fine all along. Oh God, wow. And just beat the ever loving shit out of John Moxley. John Moxley was wearing the crimson mask. He was sputtering, and he looked like a dead fish as the show went off the air. It was a really, really compelling way to build this feud to a fever pitch ahead of Saturday.
okay, I like the sound. I like the sound of that. Like it's very, especially with the whole try to get the finisher band. It's very old school to me. Like something you'd see in A's and WA, or when it calls me back to like '07 Survivor Series where the they went out of their way. It was like Shawn Michaels versus Randy Orton, and they went out of their way to get his Punk Kick banned or something like that.
Mm,
And he said he'd only agree to stipulation if the Sweet Chin Music was banned. And like I love stipulations like that. Super super good heat.
yeah.
The lawyer aspect is very. It sounds like something Moxley would do when he was doing the corny comedy stuff in WWE. So like I don't know, how did it come off when they were? Was it like goofy stuff or?
No, so Mark Sterling, the guy who played the lawyer, is a legitimate wrestler, is a trained wrestler. Like he trained at Create a Pro, which is Brian Myers' training company up in New York. So he knows what he's doing, and he bumped his ass off for the guy. Like he looked destroyed, and John pulled no punches. They did the spot where in WWE would include like 7,000 camera cuts, but there was no camera cut. It was great. I loved it.
Okay, well that's good at least. I'm glad they're at least presenting it really well
Yeah.
because as long as he's not doing like the same like comedy stuff that I don't
No,
know.
no, no, no. There's nothing funny about John Moxley's character in AEW right now, and it's great. And going back to the comedy thing, that's kind of been MJF's bread and butter. Is like I'm funny, I'm funny, but I'm taking myself seriously. And there was a promo cut earlier in the night that basically John said he was going to have to go, MJF that is, was going to have to go to like the deepest, darkest parts of himself and kill John to take that title. He was going to have to murder him to get him to keep his shoulders on that mat for 3 seconds. Otherwise, there's no way he's going to lose. And you saw that switch flip in MJF's head when he was beating John Moxley to a bloody pulp. You saw him start to relish in the fact that his fist was sinking into his face and there was no one behind his eyes to keep him calm. Like it was the way you see on like Shark Week where a shark smells blood and their eyes just go pitch black, like their irises open up. That's the way it was with MJF. Like you saw him realize that he could really do this. If he put in the work now, if he beat him down bad enough now, he might be able to walk out Saturday with that world title. And it was just really, really well done. A fantastic way to end that show.
Okay, I like the sound of that. Now, do you think that MJF should win the belt on Sunday or Saturday, whenever they do it.
I think MJF should be the next champion. I don't think All Out is when he should win it. I think letting John hold it so that he, at least gets 9 months or even a year out of it is probably for the best. I think they'll probably put the title on MJF there because he has crossed 190 days with that title. He's been with that title for about 6 months now, and the way AEW kind of does their booking is every 6 to 9 months those titles flip. So I do think if he's going to lose the title soon, it's going to be Saturday at All Out.
I agree with that. Like, I feel like from the sounds of it, like the way they've been booking MJF, it sounds like it's like a now and never thing. Well, not now and never, but like I
They're
feel
building
like
him to be dominant for the next 20 years.
exactly.
And the
Like I
best
feel like
way to do that is give him that like calling card of all you young guys that came in with me. I'm the first one to get that title belt. I'm the first one of us to be champion. I'm the best of us, and you all know it. So now you set up like Jungle Boy to feud with him for the next 6 months, going after that same title since they're in similar weights.
hmm exactly. And I also think that would be like really great heel heat for him if he could just like brag about that forever. Say, I'd be a former WWE champion, future WWE Hall of Famer. I was the first young guy to win this title, homegrown guy to win this title. And I feel like he, at least like character wise and promo wise, he could have like a really, really great reign with that belt. Because like you said, like he's got enough potential as a character to carry that company as a top heel for the next 20 years. And this could be like the perfect starting point to like establish him as a believable top heel.
Absolutely, 100%. Just before we get going, I do want to introduce my new segment on the show, and that's Sam's Indie Watch List. I watch a lot of wrestling. I watch a lot of indie wrestling. This is just where I pick out a show that I saw in the last week, in this case, 3 months, and I tell Jam and by extension all of you that it's something you should go out of your way and watch. And that event is Black Wrestlers Matter at blackwrestlersmatter.com. With everything going on right now and all of the unrest in our country, some of the best wrestlers in the country came together and put on a really incredible show. There were two matches on that card that really stood out to me, and that was Devin Monroe versus Faye Jackson. Devin Monroe came out to the ring with Sunny Kiss. And they had a really, really phenomenal match. There was a really great moment that you've probably seen on Twitter where Devin Monroe and Faye Jackson took turns twerking on each other in a church pew. It was really odd, but also incredibly entertaining at the same time. It was so, so good. And then more on like a just hard hitting physical match, we had ACH versus JADX. ACH, of course, the former Jordan Miles in WWE, had a very public exit from WWE and has been reestablishing himself on the indie scene over the last year or so. And this was probably one of my favorite matches of the year. So it's $10 at blackwrestlersmatter.com. All those proceeds go to paying the wrestlers that took part in the show a fair wage, and then I believe some of the any excess money they have after the wrestlers have been paid is going to a charity, but don't hold me to that. And then Jam, you had a segment you wanted to do first as well?
Yeah, just so every week, like since I'm not like active in wrestling anymore, I just want to like ask or really just answer the question like, is wrestling worth watching now? Because like when I left wrestling, like I was kind of soured on it in a way that I just wasn't keeping up with it at all in the last 3 months. But thankfully, I have friends in wrestling who still watch it actively and insist for whatever reason to call me, text me, DM me, everything that's happening. And like, oh Joe, did you know that such and such just won the title, or this is happening with Bailey and Sasha Banks? And like the whole time I'm
You
kind
don't
of
have to
like,
call me out like this. This isn't necessary.
no, you're just one of many. You are one of many.
Fair
Multiple
enough.
people have done this, and enough people have done this where I'm just kind of like, I need to just embrace my status in the wrestling community. I'm always going to be connected to the wrestling community in some way. I don't want to hate wrestling or anything like that. I wanna more than anything, I just want a reason to get back into it if I can. And judging on everything that you've told me, I would say wrestling's not in a perfect place right now, but there's enough reasons to justify watching it. Namely, Black wrestlers matter. Like that sounds incredible. Like I even read this article over at Daily DT by Phil Lindsay where he talked about just the need for wrestling, something that euphoric happiness in this tough times, especially for the Black community. And he talked about how now more than ever, Black voices need to be elevated in wrestling, and I completely agree with that. And more than that, I just feel like not just Black voices, but people in wrestling overall, like you need to support the wrestlers at least. Like there are a lot of wrestlers who deserve support. Either buy their merch, watch the product, buy Black Wrestlers Matter.
Yeah, no, definitely. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like where you're at right now is indie wrestling. Yes, buy your subscription to IWTV, buy that subscription to High Spots. Maybe don't give WWE and AEW your $10 a month just yet. They haven't quite done enough to earn your good graces back, but there's definitely enough really talented indie wrestling right now that makes it worth at least checking out.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You said that perfectly. You should be my ghostwriter. Like that was
Hey
that's
man, you
exactly
pay me, I'm down. You pay me, I'm
it.
down. Alrighty. Well, thank you all so much for joining us on our very first episode. You can follow me on Twitter at Gladen, Sam, spell out the comma. And you can read my coverage of all things pro wrestling at dailyddt.com and belltobells.com.
And you can follow me on Twitter at Wham Bam is Jam. You could listen to my other podcast, Check-In Pod on Twitter. It's called the Mental Health Check-In Podcast, where we just talk about raising mental health awareness. Sam was actually a guest recently. His episode hasn't come out yet. Give it like another week or two, but like that episode's the whole reason we even have this podcast. We have
It
this
might be out
natural
by the time
chemistry.
this goes live, honestly.
It might. But if not, then that's something to look forward to. Check it out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave us a rating and a review. It really helps us out. You can also follow the show itself on Twitter at LapsGraps. That's LAPSEDGRAPS. And until next time, we
We're
out.
out.